The US controls Japan. Do you believe in this statement? If not, then this video will make you agree with this statement. The US has ordered Japan to put restrictions on China, and Japan has immediately done so. But why is Japan so suppressed that it worked on the US's orders without even thinking about its loss? The restriction would result in an economic loss that is hard to recover from. But why didn't Japan consider it? What impact would both Japan and China face after the restriction? Let's find out the answers to all our questions. Welcome back to another exciting episode of our channel. Innovation Diary brings you China's innovation stories, projects, and growing influence in different parts of the world. If you are new to the channel and enjoy learning about fast-paced modernity, especially China's development and growing power, you will find our videos intriguing. In this video, we will discuss why Japan followed the US's orders without giving them a second thought. We will also talk about the impact of the restriction and China's reaction to the move. Watch the video till the very end to know the outcomes of the decision. Let's get started. In recent times, Japan has stepped into the chip restriction moves on China. The chips equipment as well as the advanced chips exports to China are being banned. The agenda is to involve China in the chip crisis by putting chip restrictions. But the speculations that were made by Japan didn't turn out right. Many aspects of the restrictions were ignored that will soon pop up on the surface. It is important to consider some insights to know what exactly will be the outcomes of the actions that Japan took. To understand what will be the impact of the restrictions in the long run, one must know why the restrictions were put in the first place. Were the restrictions a result of external pressure? China and Japan have always been a part of healthy competition. In many sectors, the nations kept surprising each other, but things never turned into conflict. Japan was known for its automobile industry. Its exports were large in number, and as compared to any other nations, its exports were exceeding. But as China introduced itself as a tech market, it mastered many sectors, including the automobile industry as well. Japan was somewhat replaced by China, but both nations never had personal conflicts with each other for that reason. The competition was healthy, and the reason why the competition never became a conflict, as it did between the US and China, is because Japan and China needed each other. The countries are separated by water, and being very close to each other, both see each other as a business priority. The trade relations between China and Japan are very serious. But the news came as a shock when Japan decided to restrict the chip exports to China. Japan has banned 45 nanometer chip exports to China. For those who don't know, the 45 nanometer chip is one of the most advanced chips used these days. These chips are used in almost all devices, and without their export, it can limit the production in huge Chinese companies. But what makes many individuals question is why the two countries, one of the best business partners, ended up here. Before we continue further, tell us, are you loving the video? If yes, please like and share the video and subscribe to our channel for more videos about China's development, power, and influence on the world. Let's continue now. In recent times, the only country that has tried to put chip sanctions on China is the US. The US tried everything to limit China's chip production as well as chip exports from other nations. Sometimes the US approaches companies to ban chip-making equipment exports, and often it forces nations to put sanctions on China. Very recently, the US asked ASML to stop its lithography machine exports to China. The plan is to make the Chinese chip industry helpless. When ASML rejected the US's request, it was highlighted internationally. The ASML came forward and clearly expressed that it is not going to stop its business with China ever. And to prove this with actions, ASML even accelerated the order delivery to China. Now the US was left helpless and had to hit China's chip industry with a different move. And the US thought of using no one else than Japan. Japan is China's closest business partner, but it is the US's closest ally. And more than other US closest allies, the US has old influential roots in Japan. According to experts, the US and Japan have maintained good relationships after the Second World War. The friendship has resulted in economic benefits, but also raised security concerns. The US's more than necessary influence on Japan makes it appear weak. We won't get into why Japan has still allowed the US to have a strong grip on Japan, but let's just say it is what it is. But a brief answer to, does the US influence Japan is yes. And this is not what we are saying, but according to the US State Department, the US maintained its influence over Japan with the help of corporations. This makes it very obvious that the US ordering Japan to do something will ultimately make Japan do it because of its very strong and deeply rooted influence. And this is what everyone has been saying. After being rejected from ASML, the US now hoped for Japan to ban the chip exports to China. Understandably, Japan is under US pressure, and the decision was a pressurized step. But the harm of this decision would be prominent. If you look at this graph, you will understand that Japan's chip sales in China have always increased compared to the previous year. Last year, the sales reached 1279 billion won. And while this graph symbolizes China's dependence on Japan, it also shows Japan's economic dependence on China. China is Japan's largest market, and its chip demand in China helped Japan become one of the largest chip exporters. The restrictions will not only make the Chinese tech industry face some limitations, but it will also impact Japanese sales. But before we discuss the outcomes of restrictions on Japan, let's first talk about China. In some previous years, China has worked on dealing with challenges and reducing dependency on other countries. According to a report by Analysys Mason, China is getting 75% self-sufficiency in 5 key semiconductor categories. Within 5 years, China's goal is to achieve 75% self-sufficiency. And this research tells us that amid sanctions and restrictions, China will be able to achieve its goal. The government has made strategic plans to achieve self-sufficiency. The plan is backed by the Made in China 2025 initiative that highlights less dependence on other countries. According to IC, China has become the largest semiconductor consumer, with a market value of $143 billion. With increased demand, self-sufficiency is necessary. The reason why China worked for self-sufficiency was to deal with challenges. And Japan's restrictions are one of the challenges China was ready to fight. This means the restrictions would not cause severe problems for China because it was already expecting this. China will be able to increase its chip production because it has made lithography machines as well. So the impact of Japan's restriction didn't come out as expected for China. But what will be the impact of these restrictions on Japan itself? China was a member of Japan's supply chain. It was one of the significant markets for Japan's chips. Disturbing the trade relations with China would result in financial loss and a shake in the production alliance. Japan's economy heavily depends on exports, and mostly the revenue is generated from the chip export. 70% of Japan's total chips destination was China. Restricting China would make Japan lose its revenue, and as a result, China will also take some actions. Many Japanese companies are working in China. China plays an important role in Japan's supply chain as well. Some of the devices were exported from China to Japan. But after the restriction, China will also put bans on Japan. The economic consequences on Japan will be hard to bear. Japan has also shown interest in joining BRICS. But after the restrictions, it is clear that China will not let Japan join BRICS. China can never let a country become a part of BRICS that is under US pressure. It simply means that Japan's loss is more than China's. Japan has supported the US, but currently the US is not in the condition to favor Japan back. The US is under the burden of a falling economy. It is under a debt crisis and is fighting with de-dollarization at the same time. China will be able to fight Japan's restriction, and the plans are already in action. But the US seems to have no options other than restriction to fight back. And mostly the restriction has not given the benefits the US expected. So at this time, when the European countries have chosen China's side, Japan still decided to stand with the US. But what benefit can this provide Japan? How will the US, which is not able to help itself, provide any aid to Japan? We leave this up to you. Do you think Japan made the right choice by choosing the US? Will the US ever be able to do anything in return? What would losing China mean to Japan? Let us know in the comments section. Do you think it's only Japan who is at a loss right now? Do you want to watch more videos like this one? If yes, please like and share the video and subscribe to get exclusive videos about how phenomenally China is developing and growing its influence over the world. Until the next video, stay tuned.